Welcome back to Advocacy in Motion. I'm your host, Tommy Finn, and we are here every week to give a vision and a voice to nonprofit organizations and individuals making an impact in our community. Before I introduce my first guest, I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Niagara, for being with us from the beginning and for their continued support throughout the year. If you don't know, Niagara is the leading manufacturer and distributor of water-saving plumbing products. Their new stealth-designed toilets can save up to 60% of water and up to 60% of cost. That's important to everyone, but it's mostly important to the affordable housing projects they support. Saving money at the nonprofit level is important to everyone because that money can be better spent. So thank you, Niagara, for being with us from the beginning and for your continued support. My guest today, when you hear him speak, you may know who he is. He is a former broadcaster, newscaster, rock and roll DJ back in the day. You've heard him on many voiceover commercials and documentaries. He's a motivational speaker and an author. And today he is the manager of outreach for Envision Dallas. Please welcome my friend, Blake Lindsey.
Thank you, Tommy. Hello, everybody. Sure good to be with you today.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Now, we met about a year or so ago, I guess, and you invited me down to Envision Dallas.
Yes.
And I think we were talking about some fundraising at the time, but you took me on a tour of the facility. So tell us about, I think people may know it as the old Lighthouse for the Blind.
Exactly.
But it's Envision Dallas now. Tell us about Envision Dallas and your mission and about the facility.
I certainly will. Dallas Lighthouse for the Blind was a great place that I got hired at about 14 years ago, back in 2009. And since then, we have gotten acquired by Envision up in Wichita, Kansas. That's our parent company. And so we call it Envision Dallas, former Lighthouse for the Blind. It's a great place to be, even better now, because we've done so much to perfect our services and enhanced our facilities. 3 years ago, they did a lot of renovation on our current building. And the exciting news is, in 11 months, we're going to be moving to Farmers Branch there at 635 and 35. And we have a brand new place. We bought the former AT&T call center, which is all wired for sound. It's really in good shape technologically. It's the building was built in 1988, but it's going to be really modern. We're renovating it right now, so we're kind of in the middle of a capital campaign. But we can hardly wait because we get to hire around 200 people who are blind and visually impaired in addition to what we already have over the next 3 years. And that's really exciting. You talk about growth right now. We are probably right around 125 people who are blind or visually impaired working with us in our building and in our call center and our manufacturing, which we can discuss. And it's just exciting times to be a part of Envision Dallas.
That's great. You mentioned some of the departments there. And when I was there, I had no idea of the scope of things that Envision Dallas does as far as training, as far as manufacturing, helping the community, employment. Tell us a little bit about some of the departments there, and especially tell me about that apartment that you have in there. That's really special.
Well, Tommy, we're all about independence for people who are blind or visually impaired, whether it's somebody losing their sight later in life that needs to be reacclimated with what it's like to be blind, learning how to do things in a new way. And that's a common thing. You know, when people lose their sight, they think it's the end of the world until they come by Envision Dallas and they see, number one, they see a lot of people who are blind and visually impaired, or they hear, I should say, if they've lost their sight. But before long, they're excited about life again, and their attitude does a 180 in most cases. Everybody's got a different transformation time. It's all according to attitude. But what we have in the way of services is an orientation and mobility teacher. That's so important. That was one of my key things in life. When I was 10 years old, almost 11, I grabbed my cane for the first time and learned how to use it. And by the time I was 14, 15 years old, I was crossing busy stoplights at four-way intersections because of a mobility teacher that knew what they were doing to teach me the right way and how to laser focus my hearing on the vehicles as they were starting out. You have to wait for two vehicles to pass by the correct way, before you cross the street safely. So we have orientation and mobility. There's a lot to learn there, and it's great stuff. You talk about getting people independent. Orientation and mobility is key. The second thing we have is an occupational therapist. And there's a need for that, especially for people who are low vision. She teaches. Her name is Marit Franklin, and she is really awesome. We're glad to have her. She's been with us for about a year now. And we also have assistive technology training. And what I'm meaning by that is computer training. People want to be competent computer users. Obviously, it helps our communication capabilities, but it also helps people to be able to get jobs or to go back to school. Maybe they want to go to college. I've had people, there was a gentleman about 78 years old who lost his sight later in life, and he was a consultant. And he said, I know how to use a computer already, but I need to learn how to use it the new way with a speech software called Job Access with Speech. We call it JAWS for short. So we thoroughly teach people how to be competent computer users with assistive technology. But that's not enough. You got the iPhone now. This is the best technology in the world. We'll talk about that later. But this iPhone has opened up all kinds of things for me. And so iPhones and iPads, we love to teach iOS products because they're so advanced. You know, Steve Jobs, when he was CEO and still alive and CEO of Apple, Steve's big motivation was to get everything acclimated for the use for people with disabilities of all types. And that includes people who are blind. Thank you very much, Steve Jobs. We're really appreciative of the capability that we have with an iPhone, being able to text, email. We've got money reader apps. We've got a visual app called Be My Eyes. It's a virtual person with sight, that can help us anywhere in the world. They can help us. And so we can talk more about that, but we teach people how to very competently use an iPhone or an iPad. And so people have different needs. We always meet them exactly where they're at. We have some of the most patient trainers. And the nice thing about our assistive technology trainers, Tommy, is the fact that they're blind or visually impaired themselves. They use this stuff every day themselves. And they're very relatable because when somebody loses their sight, they want to be taught by somebody who's blind or visually impaired for obvious reasons. They don't want to say, well, no wonder you can do it. You can see, for goodness sake, And so that excuse becomes eliminated immediately. And we're excited about that. During COVID, which was not a pleasant time for anybody, our assistive technology trainers, in my mind, got even better because they were able to do things virtually over the phone, through Zoom, and they would listen to people's computer on the other side, in their homes. And so they were able to communicate and enhance their communication skills even more during those COVID times. And so then when people came back to our facilities, and we were sure glad about that, when people got to return, our guys were better than ever. So we're glad to have people who are blind and visually impaired teaching. Our orientation and mobility teacher has full sight, and her name is Kayla Torres. Very good. And then we have serving our seniors. That's another thing that we have. It's a wonderful service with Envision Dallas called Serving Our Seniors. And that is for people who are as young as 55 all the way to 100. We've had clients 100 years old. My friend Helen Petinslak, I never will forget her, and her daughter Judy. They were just incredible to work with. And Helen was about 98 when she lost her sight. But Claudia Torres came in there, and other Torres, they're not sisters. Claudia and Kayla are not sisters or anything, or related, but they're wonderful at what they do. And so Claudia Torres goes out to a home, and she assesses the exact needs that somebody has. And she's very specific in her help according to what people's exact needs are. She can customize her program for them. But typically, Claudia will spend about 3 hours out there at somebody's home asking them a lot of questions and giving them a lot of answers. But she's not done with that. She will call them soon to make sure that they received everything and that they don't have any questions. And if they do have questions, she answers them. But she wants to make sure that they contact the resources that are mentioned when they are. And Claudia usually leaves some things behind that donors help us to be able to provide for people who a lot of times can't even afford services. We never turn anybody away. That's the whole thing about Envision Dallas. We absolutely serve anybody and everybody, regardless of whether they can pay or not. And that's where donors really help us with that side of the business. So our services are so meaningful to people, especially those losing their sight between 55 and 100 from macular degeneration. You've got retinitis pigmentosa. That's another big one. And diabetes. Those are the three main ones that steal people's sight later in life. But your life is not over. When you come to Envision Dallas, almost immediately, not quite, but in a period of just a few minutes, you definitely are glad you're there. And then the apartment that you asked about, wow, we just got this 3 years ago. Esther's Place was a place at the American Foundation for the Blind. AFB had it for many years. And a few years ago, they told us that they were going a different direction. They're still existent. AFB is still doing a great job on so many levels. You can look up AFB and find out everything that they're doing. But they blessed us with the opportunity to have this apartment in Envision Dallas facilities. In our organization, we now have that, and thanks to AFB. So we partnered with them. We put a lot of time and effort and money into this place to make sure that it's got all the meaningful tools that people need who are losing their sight, or if they already had sight loss. They come in there and they realize that there's a lot of different ways that you can do things and not have to lose your ability to be able to do these things as they thought they would. When people lose their sight, they think it's the end of the world for a moment. Most people do. And in no time at all, they realize, hey, with a little bit of practice and a little bit of knowledge about what my assistive technology capabilities are, or just simple modifications, putting big dots on things, these sticky dots will last a long time. And so on my microwave oven, for example, I've got a touch screen. And so you'll put it on stop, start, maybe the 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, and you're able not even to have to braille it. You can just have a person simply put these big sticky dots to be able to let you know where you're on the screen. They're tactile. You can do the same thing with a washer and a dryer, a refrigerator, whatever. It has a flat screen because just about everything does these days. You don't need it so much on an iPhone, although there's different things you can put on an iPhone or an iPad to help you get around better. But the voiceover feature that Steve Jobs enabled is exactly what I use with the iPhone. I can get that out and show you in a little while.
Well, you've talked about that nobody pays, ability to pay, which brings up fundraising. Everybody has to raise funds if you're a nonprofit organization, and I know that's a big part of what you do down there. Tell us a little bit about some events coming up, some ways people can be involved, and what you're doing to help raise funds for Envision Dallas.
Well, Tommy, we just had our Golf for Vision tournament, and we do that every year toward the end of April. And we have the best time. We go to Cowboys, and that's a nice place. I tell you, everybody always has such a good experience. The food is great out there, and the service. And so we had a lot of people. I'm trying to think how many. It's usually about 144 golfers that we try to get. Usually, we'll get maybe 136 out of that 144. But we have several teams, and then we have a lot of awards that we give away and everything. But we raise some good money. A lot of times we'll raise as much as $100,000 for that event, and that certainly helps us with our service side. Now, a lot of people say, well, Blake, how are you paid? And that's a good question. Our manufacturing contracts we'll talk about in a little bit as far as, the extensiveness of what those are. Manufacturing and our call center and those contracts that we get, Tommy, are how I get paid. So they have nothing to do at all with our wonderful donors who support services and programs. And so those are totally paid for by donors. And so when people can't pay, we have fundraisers really year-round. You can donate to Envision Dallas by going to envisionus.com. There's a donate link. You want to go on Dallas or Wichita, and you can donate anytime. But our primary fundraiser right now is the Golf for Vision tournament that will be again next April, I'm sure. And we always look forward to that. It's an incredible awareness time as well, as we're educating those people what we're doing, where their money went last year. And that's always a lot of fun to be able to literally tell people, here's how the money was invested last year. We've got proof. We take a lot of people through Envision Dallas the day of the golf tournament. They'll come early that morning, and we'll take them through so that they can kind of see the results of last year's event. And it makes them even more excited that they're a part of it this year. And we'll have more fundraisers that we'll announce, but we're right in the middle of a campaign fundraiser right now. It's the Capital Campaign, and this is for the new building that I mentioned in Farmers Branch. We're raising $15 million, and thankfully we're already around $8 million of that raised. We still have about $7 million to go, but this is going to incredibly increase our impact is the main thing. It's not just a new building to go to and to get familiar with, but it's a building that is more than, it's almost 2.5 times the size Right now, we're working with 87,000 square feet. This new facility will be 210,000 square feet. And so we got a lot of growing to do. And we're excited about the impact of hiring so many more people who are blind that need a job all over the state of Texas. We'll be able to reach out to Austin in different areas where people are looking for work. And even here in Dallas, in the 11 counties we serve, there are over 150,000 people who are blind or visually impaired between the ages of 18 and 80. Those folks that we serve, usually 18 to 70-year-olds, are working with us, but we have our Serving Our Seniors program. So we're literally serving people, really, I should say 18 to 100. But there's over 150,000 people in those 11 counties that we serve. There's 9 different locations in Texas that are similar to Envision Dallas, but we're all separate. And we're all under the NIB, National Industries for the Blind. We're all under that umbrella, but we're doing different projects, and we're all competing for opportunities to have these contracts. And we got to show that our facilities are up to it, and we're ISO certified. That's a high credential there that you have to be able to please the military. Man, they want things perfect, next to it. And so we're able to produce some wonderful products that we're really proud of.
That the manufacturing and business side of Envision Dallas, something I was really not aware of, and seeing that in the tour we took, and one thing that stands out, and I tell people, if you see somebody working on the street wearing a yellow or an orange safety vest, more than likely it was made at Envision Dallas.
That's exactly right.
And,
real proud of that.
And, I'm watching this conveyor line that the vinyl would come down. There's a huge stamping machine that would stamp out the vest, and the gentleman working there was visually impaired. And he said, I see just well enough to keep all my fingers out of the machine. And it seems just a wonderful working environment down there. If you guys do so much from the commercial side, like you said, that helps pay for what you're doing.
I'll tell you another thing I just want to jump in and mention is Luis Vargas. I call him MacGyver. A lot of people remember that show from the 80s, but this guy could invent anything and everything. And so our MacGyver, Luis Vargas, is an engineer by trade, and he goes in there and he modifies the equipment for safety, accuracy, and efficiency, and does an incredible job. Occasionally he'll close his eyes so that Luis can kind of envision what it's like to be blind for a moment and how to best suit whatever it is that he's modifying. And then we go the extra. You talk about keeping your fingers out of the machine. Well, we definitely show people how to be very careful. And we're having less and less first aid incidences every year. We're really careful. And Luis does a good job of constructing the equipment, putting these guards, he calls them jigs. And so come out and see us at Envision Dallas. I want to take people through, Tommy, just like when you came through, so that people can really see it and believe it. It's kind of funny to hear that from a totally blind guy like me. Say, see it, you got to see it to believe it. You'll be able to hear it and feel it, and you'll be able to sense that camaraderie that we really have at Envision, because people are blind and visually impaired, and so we've been there and done that. When somebody loses their sight and they come in there, they're like, man, I like this place, because now I get to be around people who have been blind longer than I have in a lot of cases. And it's just really incredible camaraderie that we have. The been there and done that really kind of helps out in teaching people that, hey, your life does not have to end, and you're going to have a lot of good life back. I've had a lot of people tell me, they say, Blake, I've had people say, going blind might have been one of the best things that ever happened to me. I didn't realize it at first, but as I went along, I started seeing things in a different way. And I started being more grateful for what I still can do, more than I ever did when I had all 5 senses. And so they really increased their common sense in that sense.
Well, I'm going to take a little break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk just exactly about that, about your life and what you've gone to and what your motivation is. But right now, I want to take a minute to thank one of our sponsors, Piranha Haven. This is a wonderful little gift shop in downtown Richardson, and if you go in, you'll find artwork from local artists, merchandise from free trade villages. You will find incense, crystals, just a wonderful environment. And Piranha is Sanskrit for energy and life force. And that's what you find when you walk in the door. Also, also, on the fourth Saturday of every month, they hold a psychic fair, and you can go to piranhahaven.com to get all the details, see all the merchandise they sell there, and details on booking psychic readers online, or come to the psychic fair the last Saturday of every month. And if you go in and you see Alex, tell her dad said hello. And if you hear the baby, tell her granddad said hello. We have a new granddaughter that will soon be a shop baby there. So we're really pleased with the work they're doing in the community and the support they're giving to so many nonprofit organizations as well. So piranhahaven.com, check them out, or stop by in downtown Richardson. All right, now about you, okay? We kind of know about Envision Dallas and what you're doing, but tell us about the family experience. You lost your sight when you were 9 months old.
Exactly.
How did
9
that
months
happen?
old.
Tell us about that to begin with.
Well, my mom and dad were 25 and 6 years old when I was born, and they had their master's degree. A lot of things were definitely going well with them. My older brother, 15 months older than I, he was born, and Brad had all 5 of his senses. I like to tease him today, and I like to say, Brad, you've even got common sense today. So I'm real proud of him, but he's done well. And having an older brother was fun because we were close enough to the same age that we had a lot of commonality. But what happened to me during that first 8 or 9 months, I could see. When I was first born, I had all 5 of my senses. I'm still working on common sense, though. But as I went along, Mom and Dad began to notice that my eyes started looking unhealthy. And they also noticed, even though I had a good appetite, that I was hesitating on opening my mouth during feeding time. So when it was time to open up the mouth and take a bite, I wasn't doing it. And so they knew that I had some vision loss, and they were very concerned about that. And Mom and Dad started taking me to the family doctor, who really didn't have an answer. But all these doctors that they initially went to were enthusiastic about Mom and Dad going on to the next doctors that they would suggest. And so finally, Mom and Dad went to a panel of doctors that really knew their stuff in Indianapolis. I believe it was the IU Med Center, but it was an incredible place of smart people that said, Blake's got retinoblastoma. Kind of sounds like dynamite, doesn't it, Tommy?
It does.
But it was cancer, and it was serious cancer. So Mom and Dad had to make the gut-wrenching decision to go ahead and pull my eyes, but they knew that they could save my life by doing that. So Mom and Dad were very prayerful. They dedicated my life to the Lord, and at that time, they had 2 surgeries about a month apart from each other, because I actually caught a cold during the first surgery. I guess they had my shirt off perhaps, and the AC was on, and maybe I was under a vent. And so that was a little dangerous in the sense that they had to kind of postpone that second surgery as this cancer was in there that they needed to remove. But they got it all out, and I haven't had any resubmission or reappearance of cancer whatsoever, other than some skin cancer from getting too much sun back in the day, a little too much swimming.
Yes.
And that happens. But boy, I tell you, I'm very grateful today that my life was not stolen. I've had an out-of-sight life, literally, I like to tell people, since I can't see, but also in the sense of being able to inspire people even more than ever, I believe, because I'm totally blind in both eyes. And so that experience certainly humbled my mom and dad, and they seemed to be prepared for it, even though they never had experienced that before in our family tree. You know, nobody had ever had retinoblastoma before. It was new to them. And one thing that I really enjoyed hearing later in life, when my dad and mom thought that I was ready to hear it, is the fact that both of them were willing to give one of their eyes to me. And it wasn't going to work out. They talked to the doctors extensively about that process and how that would work. But they really wanted to be able to equally contribute and sacrifice one of their eyes in effort for me to be able to see with both eyes. And when I heard that, it touched my heart indeed. And I, even though it couldn't happen, hey, I believe them. And I've heard a lot of confirmation from other relatives that did in fact happen. Not that I ever doubted it, but you know, when I was 5 years old, I'm glad that mom and dad made a decision to take me to the school for the blind, because public school teachers, when you first get in and they don't know how to teach a person who's blind if they never have before, then a lot of times they're going to give you an unnecessary break, Tommy. And they're going to give you a break that you don't really need, but they think that you deserve it at the time, and they have that sympathy, which we don't like. We like that empathy, that relatability, but sympathy is not too helpful. And people have it. I used to sympathize with people with all different types of disabilities until I get to know what their disabilities are really like and what their life is really like. And what I find is we're living our life to the fullest in our natural way. So when I was 5 years old, I went to the School for the Blind, and my kindergarten teacher had already experienced blindness, and she knew what we could do and what we couldn't. And she knew that we could do a lot more things than not. And she taught me about Louis Braille. You talk about a phenomenal guy, a lot like Helen Keller, a different situation there. But Louis Braille was only 3 years old when he was in his dad's leather workshop and had the accident of poking himself in the eye. Probably a belt notch maker, a belt maker where you're punching in and getting those notches. Not good for Louis, because that infection back in the early 1800s then spread to his other eye, and he became totally blind. And he realized when he was 6 or 7, all of my friends my age are learning how to read and write. He thought, man, I got to be the solutions guy because I don't like this, that I can't read or write. So Louis took that same thing that poked him in the eye when he was 12 years old. He said, Dad, I'm going to be careful with it this time, I promise. And his dad allowed him to have that poker again. Louis took a piece of paper and created the Braille alphabet, A through Z, numbers, punctuation, all kinds of things that enable me to be able to read and write. Now, I didn't like that at first because my first grade year, a lot of letters, there were 3 sets of letters in the alphabet that felt very similar. But my second grade teacher put those letters together side by side that were fooling me, that felt similar. And those letters, by the way, were S and P. If you look at those, very similar to each other. N and O also feel and look a lot alike. And so does Q and R. If you look at those 3 sets of the letters, they look very similar until you put them side by side. And it kind of reminds me of twins, because people are always telling me, Tommy, that twins look exactly alike until they get those 2 twins side by side, and they're like, hey, I'm going to be able to tell you guys apart whether you like it or not from here on out, And so it's kind of phenomenal how Braille works a lot the same. When my second grade teacher brought that together for me and put those letters side by side that were puzzling me, I was no longer fooled by that at all. And I made a lot of progress that year, and I've been loving Braille ever since. And I think about Louis Braille probably every day of the week. January 4th is his birthday. It's also, I got a sister-in-law, Jamie, that's her birthday. Louis Braille headed first, but both of them mean a lot to me. And so it's a very special day for me every year. But the School for the Blind enabled me to learn orientation mobility. They've learned me to really acclimate to being as independent as I could be. And that way, when I was a junior year in high school, I went to public school. And I took radio broadcasting my freshman year at the J. Everett Light Career Center. And so that was my first experience being with sighted students and inspiring those folks what a blind person could do. And they showed me what they could do. And we worked together and became friends. And it was really very fun for me. I mean, it all kind of started even in nursery school. I went to nursery school with some kids who could see. And so that was a good experience for them to kind of encounter blindness, even at the 4-year-old level. But by the time I was a junior in high school, I was completely independent because of the School for the Blind. And I was able to go in there and shine as bright as I could.
One of the things we've talked about often is your desire to overcome obstacles, to meet challenges, to embrace challenges. What has been some of the most challenging aspects of your life that you have overcome and that you move forward with?
I think interviewing with people at first, when you're interviewing with people trying to get employment, it's important to really know what your needs will be with that particular job, and also that you'll be able to do the job. A lot of people try to go with jobs that they may not be familiar with everything that there is that they're going to have to learn how to do. Some people are, but that's been the occasion that I've encountered that people have really said, well, that person didn't want to hire me. So I got to tell you, Tommy, one thing that I did learn to do later in life, I was 19 years old, and nobody instructed me to do this at all. I just kind of experimented. I thought it wouldn't hurt to not tell somebody that I'm blind before I went in.
Okay.
And so Bill Thorman, who's a close friend of mine, was program director at KTFM down in San Antonio, Texas, 102.7, #1 station in town. And I went there when I was 19 years old, didn't tell Bill that I was blind. And I was dressed for success, had on the suit and tie, probably overdressed. And somebody told Bill, hey, I heard him kind of whisper, there's this blind guy waiting for you. And Bill was thinking, who's that? Because he had talked to me before, but he didn't realize that I was blind. So he came in there and I introduced myself and shook his hand firmly. And he was really surprised. He took a step back there. But you know what I was able to do? I came prepared to talk to Bill and let him know precisely what my needs were and what they weren't. And I told him how I was going to be able to do things. And Bill told me at first, he said, Blake, I don't have anything open for you right now, but I'm glad you came because I really like your air check tape, which is what we did. We would record a show. So my previous radio station that I'd worked at in Austin was KHFI. They still exist. They're KISS FM now. But at the time, they were K98. When I went there, and I was just 18, 19 years old when I worked at K98, I got some good experience. And so when I went to KTFM, I had that air check, that recording that Bill had listened to, and he really liked what he heard. But as I talked to Bill, I told him what I could do and that I would inspire his people and that I would do the best I could to really be on top of my game every day, and that I was dependable and had a perfect attendance reputation, that I didn't get sick hardly ever, which is true today. And at the end then, after Bill had already told me that he didn't have anything for me, I decided to be bold and said, Billy, do I start this week or next? And he never will forget that because he brought it up to me years later. He said, Blake, I liked how cocky you were. You were a little cocky, but I got to say that you took me by surprise. And what Bill's answer was at that moment is, Blake, how about this weekend? I'll start you this weekend. After him, telling me he didn't have anything for me, when I asked him, do I start this week or next? He said, how about this week? And so I had a 4-year relationship with Waterman Broadcasting, KTFM, and KTSA, the big 550 AM that covers 93 counties in Texas. I got to work there for a year and a half, doing 7 to midnight. And so that's when our signal would really blanket a lot of territory. But that experience, you asked me, what the biggest obstacle is in my life. And I would say for most people that would probably be number one, is encouraging an employer in a very factual way, in an honest way, to be able to hire you in a public environment, an environment that's not necessarily set up for a person who's blind or has a disability. But you know your workarounds. You go in with that information in mind, and you're able to educate them because they don't know. A lot of people think, well, they ought to know how to help me out. Well, no, they don't. If they've never encountered a person who's blind before, never worked with, or just barely met maybe Ronnie Millsap or somebody like that who inspired them, but yet they didn't work together, then honest to goodness, they're not going to know how to handle your situation unless you let them know. And so ever since then, I've been prepared. Now, I haven't always been able to start this week or next in every situation, but that was a good opportunity for me to really open up a door. And Bill Thorman and I are still friends, not quite 40 years later. I don't want to age myself. It's like been 39 years, though, since he hired me. And I've had a very incredibly successful broadcast career, for 22 years. I got to work at Bank of America, Dallas Area Rapid Transit, and I got to work for a wonderful man by the name of Zig Ziglar, very much a motivator who encouraged and inspired me. My dad had worked for him previously, is how I got to know Zig when I was 16 years old. So I worked for Ziegler Corporation for a while, and now I've been with Envision Dallas for just about 14 years already.
So that's terrific. As you know, we publish a magazine, Youth Sports Today. My partner, Tricia Kowalski, is the publisher, and you were kind enough to write an article for us that we published in Youth Sports Today about a rather unique challenge you had. Tell us about being the field broadcaster for a baseball game.
Well, I got to be baseball Blake alive and awake for one day, and it all started out when I went to Florida for my spring vacation. And I was working at Bank of America, and I got to meet and really befriend my then 14-year-old cousin, Rhett. And I stayed with Joy and Paul. Those were my cousins who I knew very well. And I knew Rhett a little bit, but I hadn't really gotten to grow up with him. He's in Florida, and I'm in Texas. And so Rhett was 14 years old at that time, and he was in junior high baseball. And he knew that I was a broadcaster. So Rhett started asking me, Blake, would you like to be a booth announcer at my junior high baseball game? It's going to be this week. And he was going to a a large private school at that time. And I said, Rhett, there's two problems. I said, of course, I'm totally blind. That's probably not the biggest problem that I'm going to tell you about. The biggest problem is I know nothing about baseball. But let me tell you what I want to do. I'm going to call Uncle Marvin. He also lived there in Florida, nearby, about 20 miles away. And Uncle Marvin was a retired math teacher. He had taught math for over 40 years. And he was a very fun person to be around, great sense of humor. But Marvin knew his sports. He really did. He had a knowledge on sports and play-by-play and what to say. And so I called Marvin and I said, Marvin, here's my dilemma. I don't know anything about baseball, but Cousin Red here has asked me to be the booth announcer. Would you be willing to be my seeing eye person and come on in here and help me out? And he said, Blake, let's do it. Let's take on this challenge. This is going to be a fun team effort. And so Marvin and I got together, and we ended up having the time of our life. And to make it even more fun, my mom was in town visiting. And she was helping my aunt and uncle to move at that time. And so Mom was in town, and so was her older sister, Aunt Joan. And so I had Aunt Joan, Aunt Nancy, and my mother. All three sisters were in the same place with me. Uncle Marvin was to my right. He was my right-hand seeing eye person. And he started telling me exactly what was going on, and I started announcing the names of the players with authority. And I tell you what, they had no clue that there was a blind guy as booth announcer. And they were very surprised when I left there. But Marvin and I worked together, and I had my hand on that on and off switch on the microphone, which is very quiet switch. And so he would tell me what happened, and I would just bark it out real quick. And I got to get into my broadcasting voice and just had the time of my life that day. And it really taught me a lot about team effort and working together and making things possible, kind of, transforming the impossible into possible, turning those tests into testimonies. And so that was a lot of fun for Marvin and I. We never forgot it. He passed away just last year. He was around 96 years old. And he and I, to his last days there, were talking about that wonderful time that we had together and really enjoyed team effort. Taught me a lot about working together and making things possible.
Well, talking about team effort, there's not many challenges that you avoid, and we have a wonderful video of you, and it seems that you were inclined to jump out of an airplane.
A perfectly good airplane.
A perfectly good airplane. Tell us about that.
Well, I tell you, skydiving was something that I never had really thought a whole lot about, although I was kind of interested. I loved flying, and I loved adventure, for sure. And I was at a Rotary Speak one time. Camp Enterprise is what they called it. We had 168 seniors in high school out there, juniors and seniors, and they were in for a good experience on Enterprise and getting their own business. They were business-minded people. And I spoke to them about my life, and they said, well, Blake, we know that you've ridden a motorcycle on country roads and big parking lots and all that. What's your next adventure? What else would you like to do? And I just blurted out for some reason, Tommy, skydiving. I just decided that's what I wanted to do, which was kind of funny. I kind of recapped everything in my mind on the way home about how everything had gone and really had a good time, speaking to these students. But I thought, did I say skydiving? I sure did.
You have to be careful what you ask for.
Exactly that. And so 3 days later, I got a call from my buddy Charles Dowden, and he's been a banker, and so we had that commonality. Charles made it bigger up the ladder or higher up the ladder than I did in banking. But Charles called and said, Blake, we've got it arranged for you to go skydiving. And I kind of took a deep breath and I said, okay. But I was thinking, I don't really remember why I said this other than the fact that somebody asked me and I just wanted to say something. But you know what? That turned out to be one of the best experiences of my life. I got a video, as you can see, and it's a wonderful video. I've got a short version and a small a 4-minute and a 10-minute version of this thing. But it was one of the best experiences with Ernie Long. That was my tandem person. And I went in the day before to Skydive Dallas in White Wright, Texas, near Sherman Denison. And Tommy, I learned how to skydive beforehand, what motions we were going to go through and how we were going to do this. And so when I came in on that Saturday morning, October the 9th, it was a nice 88-degree sunshiny day in Texas. And the winds were only doing, I should say the breeze, 5 to 8 mile an hour. You can't beat that with a white cane on being able to skydive. I mean, that's exactly what you want. And so I went in there, 88 degrees, beautiful day. Ernie and I were ready and we were excited. and we went up to 13,500 feet, where it was 58 degrees, 30 degrees cooler up there at that altitude. We went up there, and there were 23 of us, crammed like sardines. It was a kind of a carpeted ledge I was sitting on in this plane. I'm going through it as we speak. I can remember this thing like it were today, even though it's been a good decade ago now. And I had the best time. Everybody was going out one by one, and it was our turn, and we had already kind of rehearsed, Ernie and I did the day before, how to do it. And so we jumped out of that plane, and it was a shock for about 2 seconds. That's when your body's acclimating because you're already doing 140 mile an hour when you hit the air. But what I learned later is that's as fast as you go. You don't actually accumulate additional momentum as you're falling down. You can only go a certain speed, and so you get up to about 140 mile an hour. We free-falled for 60 seconds, went from 13,500 to about 3,500 feet. It's when the parachute opens. I lost my hearing during that jump. About 90% of it I could still hear just barely. That was my only misery. If I go again, I'm going to wear special earplugs. But I had the time of my life dropping for that 60 seconds, that free falling. It feels different because you're going belly first, and so your front is facing forward. You're facing down, actually. And so it's not like your feet first. You're actually belly first, and so you don't feel queasy at all as you're falling. And then when the parachute opened, I realized that I was relieved because that was the first time, though, that I actually thought about it. I was so excited as I was falling. I thought, this is really something. But when the parachute opened up, I was relieved because everything was working like it should. And we coasted down, and Ernie Long began doing tricks with the strings. We went round and round real fast like a tilt-a-whirl at the fair, something that everybody can relate to. And we went back and forth. I was amazed at how much control he had with these strings that he would pull, and we could do anything we wanted. And he said, Blake, I'm going to give you a 3, 2, 1 now as we're approaching the ground, and we're just going to slide in on our fanny. And so we slid in on our high knees, and I had that slicky outfit on, and it wasn't a tailbone breaker at all. We just barely landed like a feather. He said 3, 2, 1, and there we were, and everybody was applauding. A lot of people had told me the day before that they were going to be there, and they could hardly wait to see a blind guy falling out of the air for some reason. That gave them an extra boost of inspiration. But I got to tell you, it taught me a lot about diving in and not hesitating. We didn't hesitate. When we said 1, 2, 3 and we jumped, we didn't hesitate a bit. And so when I inspire students of all ages with this video, I talk about diving into our goals, our challenges, overcoming our obstacles with that attitude that I'm going to do this. I'm not going to hesitate. I'm not going to postpone and procrastinate. I'm going to get after it right now, and I'm going to dive in with a game plan, and I'm going to make this thing happen. And that's exactly what we did with the skydiving experience, and it really changed my life. It really taught me a lot about diving into those challenges and obstacles and things that we have in our life. We can really handle it with that go-get-'em attitude that Ernie and I had that day.
You, again, overcoming challenges and obstacles. You've written some books. You've written your latest book, which is basically about that, lessons to be learned. And tell us about your book and how people can find you.
Well, I've written 3 books. This is my best book. My dad and I got to work together on it. And what I really like about that is my dad has been an educator for over 62 years. And he and Mom have been married for 62 years here coming up this summer. And Dad and I worked really well together because I wrote the stories in the book called Overcoming Obstacles and Getting Extraordinary Results. And I've had a lot of situations in my life where people have opened up the door for me, thank goodness. And I was able to overcome those obstacles that we thought could be in the way a little bit. But we came up with good solutions together and workarounds. And I was able to get in there and make a difference in people's life as far as inspiration. And so we turned those obstacles into opportunities to inspire people, and we got extraordinary results out of it. My dad wrote the summary, kind of ending each chapter, and a quick assessment, a self-assessment that people can do along the way. It's an easy read. I love it. It's 10 chapters. I was one of these guys that liked to read short books that made sense and really got you engaged with what you wanted to get out of whatever the book is. And I think people are going to find this to be a really fun read because I took my best stories in life where I learned the most invaluable lessons that I was able to really inspire myself the rest of my life in different areas. Sometimes when you get your anchors into stories, you can really anchor yourself to those wonderful stories and help yourself later in life to overcome additional obstacles. And we've all got hurdles to hop over in life, and so we can really help each other by talking about those hurdles and how we overcame them. And so that's what Dad and I did. He wrote an accumulative assessment at the very end that a lot of people are enjoying taking, and it's just helping bring people back to the basics. How can I overcome these obstacles? How can I get these extraordinary results that I want to get in my life? And I think you'll find it a fun, challenging read that you can probably read in 2 or 3 days at the most. And that's the nice thing about it. Overcoming obstacles and getting extraordinary results. You could go to my website, BlakeLindsey, LINDSAY.com, to get you a copy. And they're just $10. And I'll give you a free audio copy. I'll even give you a free PDF version of an ebook. And I just want people to really get a hold of this book and for it to help you to overcome your own obstacles and to get your own extraordinary results.
Thank you so much. Tell us one more time how to get the book, how to get in touch with you if somebody's looking for a motivational speaker, voiceover, any way you can contribute to the society out there. Tell us how to get in touch with you one more time.
BlakeLindsey, LINDSAY.com. And you can go up there and buy the hard copy, or actually it's a paperback. It's a nice paperback book for just $10, or you can get the free audio. I'll make sure you get that. It's already downloadable, so you can just download it. And you can communicate with me up there. My phone number's up there, all my contacts, and I'd love to hear from you. I really enjoy speaking to all kinds of groups, no matter how old or young you are. I can relate with you, and my stories have been a lot of fun to live. I remember them so vividly, and I really focus like a laser beam on the stories that make sense and can help people really develop and to overcome those obstacles and get the kind of extraordinary results you want in life.
Very good. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank again our sponsors, Niagara Conservation, for their support in the past and the support going forward, and to our friends and family at Piranha Haven for their support and what they do for nonprofit organizations in the community. Coming up next week, we have CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates, a very special program. Some good friends will join us there, so make sure you tune in. And you can always go to YouTube, Advocacy in Motion podcast to see all of our previous 20 or so podcasts. So again, thank you, Blake, for joining us.
Tommy, thank you for having me here today. I had a blast.
I did too. It's always good visiting with you. Take care.